Hi students, so in this video we shall be discussing the solutions of CS1 paper A which had come in April 2021 session from IFOA. So taking a look at the first question, we had been given a gamma distribution with parameters alpha equal to 50 and lambda equal to 0.25. And we had been asked to calculate a probability of x greater than 270 using chi-square distribution as well as using the central limit theorem. And in part 3, we needed to comment on the difference between the answers which we got in part 1 and part 2. So we know that if x follows gamma alpha comma lambda, then 2 lambda x follows chi-square with 2 alpha degrees of freedom. Using that fact, we are able to compute the probability in the first case, and we get it roughly somewhat around 1.2% once we interpolate. Using central limit theorem, we can approximate any distribution to be a normally distributed random variable. So in this case, the answer which we get is roughly 0.00676. That comes out to be around 0.676%. So now the difference between these can be explained by the fact that the chi-square distribution is something which is sort of an exact distribution. Why you might think have they asked to calculate an approximate probability? That could be because you might not have to perform interpolation. So it's probability chi-square 100 greater than 135. Maybe if you give an answer of 1%, considering this 135.8 value, that might have been accepted. So there's nothing approximate about this. This is an exact result that 2 lambda x follows chi-square distribution with 2 alpha degrees of freedom. And this is nothing but a normal approximation, so obviously it will give a different answer. Also, we see that the first answer is higher compared to the second one. This is because gamma distribution is a positively skewed distribution and will have slightly thicker tails compared to the normal distribution. Normal distribution does not have thicker tails, so it kind of undermines or underestimates the right tail events or probability of large events, which is being reflected here. Probability x greater than 270 is something which is an extreme kind of an value. So normal distribution will tend to underestimate these, given that the exact distribution is chi-square. So that is what we have in the comments part for question one. So leaving the comments part where few of the students might have struggled, the first two parts were relatively straightforward and pretty scoring. Coming to question two, U has been given to be expectation y given x, and V is being denoted as variance of y given x. Now y is normally distributed with mean 5 and variance 4, and we have also been given that the expectation of V is 2. Okay, so these are the things which we have. We have been asked to find the expected value of U as well as the variance of U. 3 marks, again, pretty straightforward question. All you need to do for these type of questions is, first define the random variable, write it down, and then you'll see things will start flowing, easily itself. It might get difficult to, think about these in your head or mentally, but once you write these down on paper, it will start flowing pretty easily. So we know that expectation y is nothing but expectation of expectation y given x, and expectation y given x is nothing but u. So what we actually want is expectation u in the question, which is nothing but expectation y. And using this result, we get it to be nothing but 5 as expectation y follows normal 5 comma 4. So we know that expectation y is nothing but 5. Coming to the variance part, we have this result where variance y can be expressed as expectation of variance of y given x plus variance of expectation y given x. So from here we have basically expectation v plus variance of u. Now variance of y follows normal distribution with variance of 4. We substitute this as 4. The question has mentioned that expectation v is 2, and we have mentioned that, and from here we have computed variance of u to be nothing but 2. So again, this is one question which students ideally should have scored in complete. But if they would have tried to mentally think about it without writing each step, they might have lost marks in these. Coming to the next question, question three, we have been given two independent uniform distributions within the interval 0 to 1. And then we have been asked to find the moment generating function of x. Then First part is identify, second part is, derive it at time t equal to 0. So that is something which we could do in part 1 as well, like that. So taking a look at question 3. First, let us derive mxt. It's a standard procedure, expectation e to the power tx, integrate between the limits, lower limit being 0, upper limit being 1. And finally, we have e to the power t minus 1 whole divided by t. And obviously where t is not equal to 0. So the option B is correct. As for calculating at the point 0, mx0 is what we want. So by definition, this is nothing but expectation e to the power 0 into x, which is nothing but expectation e to the power 0. Now e to the power 0 is nothing but 1. An expectation of a constant is nothing but that constant itself. So what we get is 1. Again, this is a result. Mx0 is equal to 1, irrespective of whatever distribution x takes. Part 3, we need to there's a random variable which has a uniform 0, 2 distribution, and we need to find the MGF of it. So again, using the usual technique, applying the standard formula, what we end up is with e to the power 2t minus 1 divided by 2t. And obviously this is the case where t is not equal to 0. Part 4 is something where they have asked to comment on the analysis or the argument that z, if we express it as x plus y, that shall also has a uniform distribution on 0, 2. So we would see that this is incorrect. Adding to independent uniform distributions does not result in a uniform distribution with parameters being added. So we'll try to find we'll define z to be nothing but x plus y. We'll find the MGF of z. So here on proceeding, we see that we are getting e to the power t minus 1 divided by t whole square, which obviously is not always equal to e to the power twice t minus 1 by 2t. So the analyst's suggestion or interpretation that x plus y follows uniform 0, 2 is incorrect. So this was, again, I would say it was a pretty easy question, pretty direct and straightforward. Next, question 4, we have been given a sample size of 25. We have a normal distribution with mean 10, variance 4, and the sample variance is denoted by S square. So we need the sampling distribution of S square, and from there we need the expected value and variance. Again, 4 marks, pretty much direct. So without much explanation, we know that n minus 1 S square by sigma square follows chi square n minus 1. The mean of chi-square is nothing but the parameter itself, and the variance of a chi-square distribution is nothing but the twice of its parameter itself. So as for expectation S square, we basically multiply and divide by 6 because we'll try to bring in this particular chi-square distribution, which is this 6x square follows chi-square 24. So from there we get expectation as nothing but 4, and variance is something which we get nothing but 4 by 3. Next, question 5. This is one of those questions which on going through certain scripts of students and having a discussion with them, I realized quite a few of them did struggle in this particular question. So this, especially the last 2-3 parts of this question, which has not been tested frequently in examination, but it was a direct application of the concepts of the chapter joint distribution. So demonstrate that x and y are independent, verify that k is equal to 2, demonstrate that the marginal density function is 2 e to the power minus 2y, where y is greater than 0. So these are something which I've done all together itself. Again, this is not exactly the format which you have to reproduce in the exam. It's slightly different. It's just, this particular picture is just to show you how to go about the solving part and not exactly the representation part, which we need to do in examination. So we know that the integration of any PDF should always give us 1. In this case, we have a joint PDF, so double integration of that should give us 1. Now using this and calculating, what we get is that nothing but k is equal to 2. So this is one of the parts which we have done through this thing. This is how I started. Whenever it's there's a constant whose value do not know. So the natural inclination would be to first find that value of that constant for a particular question. So I've computed k as 2. Now fx is nothing but integral fx by dy. Without going into the steps of integration, which is pretty straightforward, we get this as e to the power minus x. Similarly for fy, there I have again shown one step to you all just to get an idea. What we'll get is 2 e to the power minus 2y. So we clearly see that the joint probability is nothing but the product of marginal, and in this case x and y are in fact independent. If joint can be represented as product of marginal PDF, in that case both the random variables are independent. Next, part 4, we need to compute this particular expression, probability y greater than less than equal to y, given that y is greater than 3. So probability A given B is nothing but probability A intersection B by probability B. That's what we have done. We'll perform the integration of this, and what we get is 1 minus e to the power 6 minus 2y. So this is what we have first find, less than equal to. We have been asked in the question to find PDF. F, what I have done is actually calculated CDF first, because once I differentiate the CDF, I'll get the PDF. So PDF is nothing but differentiation of CDF. On differentiating, I get this 2 e to the power 6 minus 2y, given that y is greater than 3. This is what was expected. Now the next part is to identify which of the following expressions is equal to the conditional expectation of expectation y given y greater than 3. So here expectation y given y greater than 3, we have integral y 3 to infinite fy given y greater than 3. Performing these steps, we basically get this particular expression, which is nothing but option D. Another thing you just need to note that probably there was a misprint in the MCQs. All of these have dy, 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 dy. So it rather should have been actually dt and not dy. So this is something which you all should keep in mind. Next part, we had to actually compute this. So computing this would have given 7 by 2. And then we had to compute expectation y square. So again, on solving that, we would have got as answer as 12.5. So that makes it option A. And as for the last part, we need the variance, which comes out to be nothing but 0.25. So obviously students who have got part 7 wrong, they would have not scored any of the marks in part 8 as well, because part 8 was directly something which we are taking from part 7 itself. So again, some students would have definitely struggled in the last, let's say 4 parts, part 4, part 5, part 6, part 7, part 8 as well, rather last 5 parts, but well prepared candidates were able to complete this question in full. Next, question 6, we need to show the likelihood, then we need to show this particular estimate is coming out to be 0.2917 or not. So, and then we need to perform a goodness of fit test. So in total 13 marks, pretty scoring, I would say, pretty much scoring. Just that part 2 is of 8 marks. So it's very important that you state H0, you state H1, you state the critical value, how you have computed the expected values, what will be the parameters of your chi-square distribution, how many degrees of freedom it has, how many has been deducted, and what are the reasons for same. Another is finally whether you accept or reject, and then the conclusion. So this is pretty important, 8 marks. So there would be marks for all of these. So question 6, first what I've done is computed probabilities at 0, 1, 2, and 3, and I've expressed this in the form of P itself, and then I have gone on to create the likelihood, and it comes out to be 1 minus the log likelihood comes out to be 255 ln 1 minus P plus 105 log P. So option A is correct. From B part, we just need to differentiate it once and substitute as 0 to get, and we basically find the answer to be 0.2917, which is what they had asked in the question. Next part, we have the observed values. We find the expected values. Now we'll see that the expected value at 3 is less than 5. So the rule is that whenever we have an expected value which is less than 5, we club it to the adjacent cell so that the expected value becomes greater than 5. So here we combine for 2 and 3. And so this becomes my observed. We add 15 and 5 to get 20. And we add these two expected values to get a value of 24.67. Test statistic is nothing but summation O minus E whole square by E. So I've not shown the intermediate calculations here, and you'll be getting this as 2.066. We had 3 degrees of freedom. We are subtracting 1 since one parameter has been estimated, which is P here. Another one is being subtracted because the expected has been calculated using the summation of total. So this expected value, as you're seeing, it's 120. How is this 120 coming? By adding all the observed values. So it's 1 degree of freedom. I have stated the critical value, which is 3.81. Then I've stated that we have insufficient evidence. And so finally the conclusion that model is actually a good fit at a significance level of, or rather I should say a level of significance of 5%. Question 7. This was again rather a direct question. So first part is to state a suitable distribution, standard bookwork, justify any assumptions again in the material, or even while studying through it, you'll directly actually see it in the material, the underlying assumptions for using this particular test statistic. And part 3, 4, 5 are nothing but extension of that. So pretty straightforward. The picture seems to be a bit hazy. So the first part is the distribution is T n1 plus n2 minus 2, where n1 is 15 and n2 is 20. Part 2, we assume that the data comes from normal distribution. Both the data comes from normal distribution and both these data have a common variance, which is unknown. Had it been known, we could apply standard normal itself, but here it's unknown, so we need to apply T distribution. Test statistic again straight directly from bookwork. Solving, we get minus 1.031, which makes it option A. As for the 95% critical value for T33, it's 1.20345 and plus 2.0345 and minus 2.0345. How I've got these values is by interpolating between T32 and T34. So we needed for T33, one easier way or shorter way or an extremely efficient way to do this is just to take the midpoint of T32 and T34 here to get the value of T33. So we clearly see that the test statistic, is lies in the acceptance region. It's greater than this particular critical value. We would be taking the negative value here. And so we have insufficient evidence to reject H naught. So you need to give this conclusion as well. Conclusion should carry marks. I guess the institute would be giving 1 marks for stating this conclusion explicitly. And the question also states actually, write down the conclusion of the test, including the relevant critical values. So just by saying that you accept or reject the test is not sufficient. You need to give conclusion. If you're rejecting or if you are not being able to reject, so ultimately what we conclude. Acceptance, rejectance is something which is a statistical part. What we are doing with the test. Ultimately, what we need to convey is what we are concluding from it. Part 5, again, we need to we need to find the confidence interval. So there's the working for same. We get it to be 2.537 and 4.863. I have rounded these to 3 decimal places. Any further accuracy is something which is more better. So this is what we have. Next, moving forward to question number 8. So here, if you will see that you see some sort of positive correlation, which can be directly seen from the graph itself. Some form, or rather I should say there's a strong form of positive correlation. Does not necessarily have to be linear, not exactly linear, but there is strong positive correlation. And we could comment ki yes, there is, some form of linear positive correlation. So comment on the plot and the actuaries analysis. If you'll see this, what we see is a negative slope. So what here it means is that as t increases, my d shall decrease. But that is not the case. We are seeing as t increases, the d value is also increasing. So this is somewhat contradictory to what is happening. Next part is we have been given the data and we have been trying to find the equation of these. And so there we have the other two parts, that is the part 3 and the part 4. And we can take a look at the solutions for these. Part 2 by applying direct formulas where you replace x by t and you replace y by d and then work accordingly. You'll get all these values. Then just take a look at these. Pretty much straightforward, I would say. Pretty scoring question. So we basically have sufficient evidence to reject H naught and conclude that there is in fact linear relationship. And then finally towards the last part, or rather should I say part C, confidence interval has been found. Part 4A, when we perform the test whether beta is 0 or not, we have insufficient evidence to reject H naught. So we basically conclude that there is no linear relationship. And part B, we have basically calculate the confidence interval for same. So again, this was again a fairly straightforward question. Question 9, which is probably the last question, wherein it's basically from the topic Bayesian statistics and credibility theory. So again, a pretty, I would say, direct, straightforward question. The CS1 paper relatively, in the past few sessions have been relatively easier. I wouldn't say that this paper was as easy as in the previous term, but yeah, this was easy. All the papers this term, in fact, which I know have been comparatively more lengthier. Students have kind of struggled to complete this on MS Word, but going forward, it might be, the IFA for certain reasons wants to make the paper certain lengthy. One of the reasons could be to, decrease the various malpractices which has been observed to have, which are actually taking place during examinations. So maybe they think by making it linear, they can reduce that. Again, whether that serves the purpose or not could be discussed some other day. So again, coming back to the ninth question, the solution for same. Posterior is nothing but proportional to prior into likelihood. That is what we have done. And we get this particular expression, which is nothing but option C. We know this is nothing but coming in the form of a gamma distribution, and the parameters have been stated here. Next part 3a, under quadratic laws, the Bayesian estimate is nothing but the mean of the posterior. So mean of gamma is nothing but by the first parameter divided by the second parameter. So if the parameters are say C and D, it's nothing but C by D. So here it comes out to be A plus summation xi whole divided by B plus n. Next step, we need to express this in a form of a credibility estimate. Simple thing is we want x bar, we have summation xi, we multiply and divide by n to make this x bar, to make this z, and then we multiply and divide by b so that we get 1 minus z here. And we clearly see that prior comes from a gamma a comma b distribution, and the mean of prior is nothing but a by b. And that is exactly the form which I've got here. Part 4, we have nothing to do, just you need to put the values and calculate it. Part 5, we have calculated the variance. In part 6, if you'll observe, they have increased A and B. So if we'll just take a look, initially the variance of gamma distribution is nothing but A by, or rather should I say alpha by lambda square. Here this will be nothing but A by B square, which comes out to be 1. 9 divided by 3 square, which comes out to be 1. Once we take the parameters 18 and 6, the mean remains the same, which is again 3, 18 by 6. 9 by 3 is also 3, 18 by 6 is also 3. But variance becomes 18 by 6 square, which is 18 by 36, that is half. So when we're using a prior distribution which has a lower variance, this will result in a posterior distribution having a lower variance. So this is what you need to basically explain or comment in part 6. So again, overall, if you would like to ask what should be, or what could be the expected passing marks for CS1, should be broadly in the range of 57 to 60. Given the difficulty of the paper, I won't be surprised if the pass mark turns out to be 60 itself, because it was a pretty decent paper, pretty easy. Students might have only struggled with the the time part, but apart from that, all the questions were very much straightforward. So hope that you actually found this video pretty helpful. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And again, we would be starting with our live online batches for the coming session from 1st of May. So do enroll and start with the preparation so that you are in a position where you have prepared pretty well. Starting early remains the key. So thank you. Bye.